History of my oldest ancestors of whom I am very proud. June 13, 1231, dies in Padua, Saint Anthony of Lisbon. Saint Anthony's maternal grandparents, Dom Pio Soares Romeu, my 28th and 29th grandfather, and Dona Sancha Henriquez de Porto Carrero, my 25th grandmother, 9 times my grandmother, were my ancestors. Dona Sancha Henriquez de Porto Carrero was the great-great-grandmother of Dom Nuno Alvarez Pereira, by her first marriage to Dom Rui Goncalves Pereira, Lord of Honor of Pereira. Saint Anthony, named Fernando Martins de Bulao, was born in Lisbon on August 15, 1190 or 1195, and died in Padua, Italy on June 13, 1231. He was the son of Martin de Bulao and Dona Maria Teresa Tavera, paternal grandson of Vicente Martins de Bulao and maternal grandson of Dom Pio Soares Romeu, my 28th and 29th grandfather, and Dona Sancha Henriquez de Porto Carrero, my 25th grandmother, 9 times my grandmother. Biographical notes on Santo Antonio. Franciscan friar. Doctor of the Church. He professed at the age of 20 at the Canons Regular of Santo Agostinho, in São Vicente de Fora. 2 years later, he moved to the monastery of Santa Cruz de Coimbra where he was ordained a priest. In 1220, he became a Franciscan friar at the hermitage of Santo Antão dos Olives, in Coimbra, and shortly afterwards, he went to Morocco on an apostolic mission. Sick, he was forced to return to Portugal, but a storm caused the boat carrying him to land in Sicily. Summoned by Saint Francis, he preached in France, Montpellier and Toulouse, and in Italy, Bologna. Appointed provincial in northern Italy, in 1227, he continued as a preacher and professor of theology in Padua, where he died of a sudden illness. He was canonized on May 31, 1232. Proclaimed Doctor of the Church on January 6, 1946, by Pope Pius XII. Chronology of Saint Anthony. In 1221, Saint Anthony of Lisbon attends the general chapter gathered, in the city of Assisi, by Saint Francis. In 1231, canonization of Saint Anthony of Lisbon by Pope Gregory IX. The 31st of May, 1232, Saint Anthony of Lisbon is canonized. Great Portuguese and Brazilian Encyclopedia. Saint Anthony was a doctor of the Church who lived at the turn of the 12th and 13th centuries. Initially, he belonged to the Order of Canons Regular of the Holy Cross, who followed the rule of Saint Augustine, at the convent of São Vicente de Fora, in Lisbon, later going to the convent of Santa Cruz, in Coimbra, where he deepened his religious studies through reading the Bible and patristic, scientific and classical literature. He became a Franciscan in 1220 and travelled widely, living initially in Portugal, then in Italy and France, later returning to Italy, where he ended his career. In the year 1221 he was part of the general chapter of the order in Assisi. In fact, Saint Francis, the founder, summoned him, as well as all the other friars of the order. Later, when his eloquence and theological culture became known, he was appointed Master of Theology in Bologna, and then preached against the Albigensians and Waldenses in several cities in northern Italy and southern France. Finally, he went to Padua, where he died on June 13, 1231. His reputation for holiness led him to be canonized by the Catholic Church shortly after his death, distinguishing himself as a theologian, mystic, ascetic, and above all as a notable orator and great miracle worker. Santo Antonio is also considered one of the most notable intellectuals in Portugal during the pre-university period. He had great culture, documented by the collection of written sermons he left behind, where it is evident that he was familiar both with religious literature and with various aspects of the profane sciences, referring to classical authorities such as Pliny the Elder, Cicero, Seneca, Boethius, Galen and Aristotle, among many others. His great knowledge made him one of the most respected figures in the Catholic Church of his time. He taught at Italian and French universities and was the first Franciscan doctor of the Church. Saint Bonaventure said that he possessed the knowledge of angels. Today he is seen as one of the great saints of Catholicism, receiving wide veneration and being the center of rich folklore. Saint Anthony is the patron saint of the city of Lisbon. São Vicente is the patron saint of the Patriarchate of Lisbon, and is also the secondary patron saint of Portugal. He is also the patron saint of the Italian city of Padua. First years. Saint Anthony was born in Lisbon on an uncertain date, in a house, so it is thought, close to the cathedral, at the city gates, in the place where the church dedicated to him was later built. Tradition indicates August 15, 1195, but there is no reliable document that confirms this date. The year 1191 was also proposed, but, according to his biographer, Father Fernando Lopes, the contradictions in his chronology would only be resolved if he had been born around 1188. Nor is it known for sure who his parents were. None of the early biographies mention them, and it was only in the 14th century, based on oral traditions, that the name of Martim or Martinho de Bullos began to be given to the father, and to the mother, that of Dona Maria Teresa Tavera. That his father was called Martinho or Martin seems to be true, as the obituary of São Vicente de Fora recalls the death of a sister of the miracle worker who was a nun and who went by the name of Maria, daughter of Martinho. In any case, these names became fixed in popular memory, and with the saint's growing fame, it was not difficult for later biographers to also attribute a superior dignity to his parents. From his father he was said to descend from the celebrated Godofredo de Bullau, commander of the First Crusade, and from his mother, who descended from Fruela I, king of Asturias. The form of his baptismal name is equally obscure. It may have been Fernando Martins or Fernando de Bullos, or Bullau. He did his first studies at the Church of Santa Maria Maya, today the Cathedral of Lisbon, under the direction of the canons of the Order of the Rulers of St. Augustine. As was the practice of the order, he must have received instruction in the liberal arts of the trivium and quadrivium, which certainly shaped his intellectual character. Entering as a teenager as a novice of the same order, at the monastery of São Vicente de Fora, he began studies for his religious formation. The library of São Vicente de Fora was famous for its rich collection of manuscripts on natural sciences, especially medicine, which may explain the constant scientific references in his sermons. A few years later he asked permission to be transferred to the monastery of Santa Cruz de Coimbra, in order to perfect his training and avoid profane distractions, as he was constantly visited by friends and relatives. Coimbra was at the time the intellectual center of Portugal, and there he must have become deeply involved in the study of the Bible and the texts of the Church Fathers. At this time he came into contact with the first Franciscan missionaries who had arrived in Portugal in 1217 and who were on their way to Morocco to evangelize the Moors. His preaching of the gospel in the spirit of simplicity, idealism and Franciscan fraternity and his missionary determination must have touched Fernando's feelings. However, an even stronger impression occurred when the bodies of these friars, killed on their mission, returned to Coimbra, where they were honored as martyrs. Authorized to join other Franciscans who had a hermitage in Olives, under the invocation of Saint Anthony of the Desert, he changed his name to Antony and began his own mission in search of martyrdom. Chronology. Genealogy. June 1, 1221, Saint Anthony of Lisbon attends the general chapter gathered, in the city of Assisi, by Saint Francis. In 1231, canonization of Saint Anthony of Lisbon by Pope Gregory IX. May 31, 1232, Saint Anthony of Lisbon is canonized.